Hi everyone. So today I don't know if you want to call it your moderator, teacher, instructor, whatever you want to call it, but I'll be doing an interview prep workshop that I hope really helps you because I wish I had those type of workshops with the information I'll provide when I was in school and when I was interviewing too. So Eleanor, Saskia, thank you for having me. You guys know that I love creating content on LinkedIn. So my first request from everyone here is to make sure to connect with everyone that's on this call on LinkedIn and connect with me as well, so that you can do two things. You can make a post on LinkedIn about this workshop and what you liked about it, or you can connect with people here and let me know privately what do you enjoy the most and when you have your next interview. Okay, so those are my two requests from all of you today. I'll share my screen in a second so we can go over some PowerPoint slides that I have. But before I do that, I do want to introduce myself because some of you probably don't even know who I am. So my name is Stephanie Nuesi. I'm the CEO and founder of MaxUp. So I'm a career coach and I help job seekers who want to advance in their careers. So what we do is basically provide resume advice, career advice, and anything and everything that helps job seekers, especially underrepresented minorities, because I myself graduated from a CUNY school. I went to York College and then transferred over to Baruch. And while I was in school, I was part of Alpha. I was the president of the chapter, and did a couple of other things. So shout out to Alpha, and thanks so much, Alpha, for having me. So aside from that, I've worked on multiple firms, which I'm going to make a little intro when I talk about the interviews and how I landed those. But if you guys have any questions in terms of how to break into different industries like technology, accounting, finance, banking, whatever it is, just let us know in the chat here. As I like to say, I want all of you to be interactive. Okay, so I know what it feels like to be in a Zoom call for an hour and not really be, into the Zoom call. So my hopes are if you're here for a whole hour, you at least, are paying attention, you're writing down notes, you're asking questions, because this is all for you, honestly. Because that's what I would hope that I would do when I join a Zoom call too. So with that being said, I will share my screen and I have a question for everyone here, and that's going to be our first icebreaker. So can you guys let me know in the chat, what is your energy level from 1 to 10? You can just put a number. If it's 5, 10, 1, 0, it doesn't matter. Just put a number. I just want to see where we at right now. I see some 10s. Awesome. Awesome. Perfect. 7, 8. Awesome. 9. Love it. Awesome. Some 10s again, 6. If you're less than 5, that means I have a big challenge. You know why? Because now I need to make sure that by the end of this call, you get to 10. Because one of the best ways to ace an interview is, guess what? It's by actually having energy and going into the interview with energy and confidence. So I hope after this call, I can get all of y'all energy to 10. Thanks so much to everyone for sending that. And I'll go ahead and share my screen now because I think we're ready. So let me just go ahead and present, and we should, nope, this is not it. We should get started now. So again, I will be speaking a little bit about interviews. So this word interview can be so scary for so many people, but it doesn't have to be scary, right? And I will tell you a little bit of an experience that I had. I was preparing a client yesterday for an interview with a very big company. And I'll tell you some of the things that I see with a lot of job seekers when we're doing mock interviews. And that's one of the tips that I will teach you guys today, how to do mock interviews. So a little bit of the agenda of what I'm going to cover. So I'll go over some of the interviews breakdown, some of the do's and don'ts of interviewing, what you should wear on an interview, because that is important, believe it or not. You're not going to wear a hoodie or, a shirt to an investment banking interview, right? So those are, there are a little bit of some details and etiquettes that you have to follow. So I'm going to teach you that today. And then we're going to go into some questions. So my goal for all of you today is to really have a better understanding of what makes a great interview. Like, how can you create a lasting and a great impression? And how I would like to say here, max up is by really maximizing your interview skills. So we'll provide you with like the resources and also like the tools you need to get into your next role. I have a gift for everyone who's attending this call today. I haven't told Eleanor or Saskia about the gift yet, but I have a gift for everyone. And so if you stay until the end of the call and you ask a question, then I'll send the gift to everyone at the end of the call. And so if you want to know what the gift is, and I promise it's going to be really great, just stick through with us till the end of the call. And I promise that you're going to love it. So second icebreaker of today, the most important question, so I can understand what you guys are struggling with. So can you guys let me know in the chat, what are some aspects that you struggle the most with an interview? Think about the last interview you had, whether that was for a club, a job, an internship. What do you struggle with? Let me know in the chat. Was that your confidence? Did you not feel confident? Did you not feel like you were good enough? You felt like you were not prepared? You felt like the questions were too hard? Let me know. I'm actually going to go ahead and look at the chat. So I see nervousness being a top one, asking questions after the interview, technical questions, awesome. Confidence again, getting to the interview. Oh, that's a good one. Mainly what was, okay, like your personality, like who you are, okay, overqualified, interesting. Having a hard time understanding the questions, how to answer, what is your work ethic? Exactly, you know, great questions and great things that you guys mentioned. Thank you so much. Nervousness and confidence is one of the top ones. So I see, and I'm going to talk about that in a few. But if you guys can, you know, continue to think about what are some things that you struggle with the interview, let me know in the chat. Don't be shy. Keep putting those things there. And I want to see how we can get through all of them. Well, hopefully all of them today. So very important. Before the pandemic, we used to have a lot of in-person interviews, a lot of what they call a super days, where they will call you, they will bring you to the company. Sometimes they will fly you out to another state to go and interview with the company. I myself, I know Saskia probably lived this as well. I went to the Alpha conference, I remember in 2019, and I interviewed with a bunch of companies, including JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and a bunch of other companies. And all these interviews were in person. I mean, just think about it like that, like this. You're basically with interviews back to back on the spot. Well, you have to make sure that you're still networking at the conference and you're walking around the entire day and then going into an interview. Just imagine how tiring that is and how, like, you know, crazy it can get when you get so many interviews. So that was before the pandemic. Now, after the pandemic, a lot of companies have shifted their recruitment and their interviews to virtual. For some people, staring in front of a camera, it's fine. That's like perfect. Some other people do not have the same ability because they prefer to speak in front of an actual person, right? Like in a physical interview. So going into virtual has had its pros and its cons. So let me tell you a little bit about the pros and some of the good things that have come with that. So there have been an increase in non-traditional opportunities. What that means: before, it was really hard to probably network or interact with like professionals from like big companies. Now, because everything is virtual, you could literally go and like have a resume workshop with like Microsoft. You could literally go and sign up for a coffee tap with XYZ company, which was really hard before because this whole virtual world was not really that famous before the pandemic. And so, you know, once all these shifts have happened, the top platform that has like really make a revolution in terms of recruiting and getting a job has been LinkedIn. So let me ask you guys a question. How many of you are active on LinkedIn? Put yes or no in the chat. What I mean by active is that you're checking the platform often. So you are actively applying, you're checking the platform. Okay, perfect. I see many messages there. Thank you so much. So here's the thing. If you're not active on LinkedIn, you need to be. like my challenge to you is that you get active on LinkedIn after this call, because some of the interviews that I've gotten have been through LinkedIn. So I want to make sure you understand that you can get an interview through networking on LinkedIn, right? It's not as crazy as it sounds, and networking isn't as scary as people make it seem, right? Because of all the shifts that we've been seeing right now, now have been an increase in remote work, right? So you could be in New York and work for a company where your team is in San Francisco, or, you know, whatever else. So you could be studying right now and taking online classes and still, you know, doing an internship because it's remote. A lot of things have changed, and I've seen it myself. It's been great, and you know, for some people not as great, but it overall it has helped tremendously with the way recruiting has been given. But at the same time, it has increased a lot of competition, right? And so when you enter an interview, I want you to understand that it's not just you that is interviewing. It's basically dozens of other people that would be as qualified as you. So you need to enter an interview with the mindset of, what do I have that will make me a better candidate in front of the hiring manager compared to everyone else that's interviewing? That's the mindset I want you to go into the interview. And that doesn't happen overnight. Don't think that that's something that you can just put into your mind and that's it. You know, that needs practice. And practice comes from preparation, which means how much you prepare for the actual interview. So I'm going to start from the basics, right? What are some of the basic interviewing advices in practice? So first things first, practice interview questions. So if I go back to what I was saying earlier about the client that I was doing yesterday, we were doing a mock interview. What we were doing was basically that, practicing interview questions. So some of the most typical questions that you can find are behavioral questions. You know, tell me about a time where you did this. Tell me about a time where you did that, right? Tell me about yourself and things like that. And so for that reason, the more you practice, the better you get at it, right? I remember asking really hard questions to my client yesterday, and the way that we were going about the feedback was that I was answering how I would like to actually, you know, see the question, or I guess like how the hiring manager would like to hear the response to that question. And so you get better at it as you practice it. Now, what do I mean by practice, right? You're not going to practice this the night before, right? You need to make sure you spend some time doing the second point, research. So you guys will be surprised the amount of times that I've been on interviews where the candidate, the job seeker, doesn't know about the company, doesn't know about the products. So let me ask you guys a question. If you can tell me what your top company in the world is right now, what would that company be? Which company? Let me know in the chat. I'm actually going to open the chat right now. So if you can tell me a top company that you like, let me know. Amazon, Google, Apple, Morgan Stanley, perfect. Amazon, Google, top companies. I love it. Google, awesome. I love that. Love all of this company. So now I ask you, which company was that, right? But if I ask you, how did that company perform last year? And what are some of the top products that that company sells? How many of you will be able to tell me? Probably not a lot, right? And so you can really say that this is your top company, but not know what the company does. See what I mean? It's the same thing on an interview. They're going to ask you, like, why do you want to work here? You shouldn't go with always the same general answer of, I love the culture of this company. Well, we all love the culture, and it is not a bad answer, but I want to know more, right? What passionates you about us? Is it our products? What do you know about our products, right? What are some things that you want to change when you become an employee of the company? And that's why it's important to research. So research the company financial statements, research the earning releases, research their acquisitions, research projects they're doing, and so on and so forth. Example, when I was in school, I interned at JP Morgan, and I actually landed the offer at the Alpha convention in 2019. So when I was on the interview, I don't remember which question I was asked, but I do remember mentioning the fact that JP Morgan was investing $20 million in Detroit, because Detroit for 2025 was going to be their New York, meaning they wanted to develop the economy in Detroit. For that reason, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, was investing that much money into developing the communities and the rural communities in Detroit to make it a better city. And I spoke about how that would benefit JP Morgan, right? And the interviewer was really surprised of the fact that I even knew about it, let alone like think about the future and how would that help the company. And so every time you're answering a question like that, like always make sure that you're saying things that would impress them. Another example, I don't remember, I think it was an interview where someone asked me, what is your leadership style? And the way I answered that question was by saying, I read a book called, I don't remember the name of the book, or I think it was an article that talked about like the 7 C's of our brains and how our brain like actually like work when you're surrounded by people versus when you're alone. And I was talking about like the different like phases of that. And you know what the interviewer said was that, can you send me the link to the article? That's really interesting. I mean, you never know, like what book did you read like recently that you could actually speak about on the interview that relates to the questions. Think outside the box. That's the point, right? So number 3, which I literally just talked about, is know the task of the role you're interviewing for. I mean, if you're interviewing for like a data analyst role, like you need to understand what you will be doing at the company. And then here's something that's very important. A mistake that I see a lot of candidates doing over and over when they're on interviews, it's that they only speak about their past experiences. So I'll ask you guys a question. You can be totally honest on the chat. How many of you have ever just speak about your past experiences on your interviews? And that's it. So they ask you, tell me about yourself, and you just say, oh, here, this is who I am, and this is where I work, and this is my past experience, and that's it. You can be honest. It's okay. We all have done it. I did it in the past. Here's the problem with that. It's great to talk about who you are and your experience and everything else, but you need to make sure that the hiring manager, that the recruiter, that they can connect the dots. Like, okay, so how will your experience help me and my team? And you need to answer that before they ask you, right? So what that means is that, well, in my experience, I've done X, Y, Z. And after I read the job description and I saw some of the responsibilities of this role, I think I can do X, Y, Z based on projects that I've worked, such as, and you mentioned some of those things. That is what I want. That's what they want to hear, because sure, you have the experience. I mean, they know it. They have your resume, but how does that help them? That's the question, right? So it's totally fine if you focus on your past experiences, but don't answer the entire question just on what you actually like, the experience that you had, if that makes sense. So the next thing is set up an informational interview or call with someone who has worked there, or a recruiter. A lot of recruiters are open to the informational interviews. If you reach out to them on LinkedIn, or if you actually have the interview schedule, they will actually be willing to do a call with you to tell you more about the interview. I mean, I've done that plenty of time. And if they don't offer it, I ask. You literally don't lose anything by asking, like, hi, I will be interested in doing some sort of informational call with you to learn more about the interview so you can get prepared more. I mean, who else more than the recruiter or the hiring manager would know about the interview? Who else, right? It's them. So you can literally do that, right? Professionally ask them if they can set up an informational interview with you. And of course, you can ask people that work at the company if they can do like informational interviews, because at the end of the day, I mean, they do that role that you want to do on a daily basis. So once you're answering those questions with them, doing a mock interview, they would know whether or not you're hitting the nail. Like they would know whether or not you are really like getting into the point that you should be getting. So now, how can you get informational interviews with this professional, Stephanie? That's a question I get a lot. Because networking, right, it's described as this huge artificial thing that it's really hard and it shouldn't be, right? So the way you do that is literally go on LinkedIn, find active professionals that are doing what you want to do, send them a connection request, send them a message, tell them the role you're interested about, not just like you want to do a call with them. Be as detailed as possible. Hi, I want to apply for this role. Aside from this role, I also want to speak about what are some things that you do at your role, and see if you can give me some advice based on this specific role and how I can better prepare for it.
Hello?
That's it, right? And
Hello?
so after you do that, you can actually do the
I have great
following.
news for you. It looks like you may be a good candidate for the ILS Fresh Start program. If you qualify, you will pay a fraction of the cost to settle your debt. Let us help you get this taken care of before.
Sorry, can I ask everyone to mute themselves? Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Good. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, and going to the last point, where we were saying, make sure you can give an example of what's going on. Like, for example, on the financial news, like a lot of you said that you want to work at like banks, like Morgan Stanley, Crow, and many other, right? Like understand what it's happening with the business. So the way you can do that, it's the following. I will mention 3 important newspapers that you should be reading. Number 1 is the Morning Brew. How many of you have ever heard of the Morning Brew before? It's literally like your go-to user-friendly newspaper to know about the news about tech and finance in just one place, right? And so for that reason, you guys should be looking at Morning Brew. You guys should be looking at the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, business. What is the other one? I forgot. Business Journal. I forgot about the other one. But those 3 are like main newspaper and places that you should be reading on a daily basis, because I believe that it's going to really help you once you are on your interviews. So after you do this, right, after you do some basic preparation, what happens next, right? Like, how can you better prepare? So I'm pretty sure a lot of you have heard of this method before. You're probably told about it hundreds of times. If this is your first time hearing about it, welcome to the STAR method word. And if it's not, then I would just recap quickly. One of the things why people fail interviews, or one of the reasons, is because they are not concise. They go on and on and on one thing, and they just don't know how to not be concise. So let me actually ask you guys a question. How many of you have ever felt like your answer was too long when you're given an interview, when you're given an answer on an interview? Let me know in the chat. How many of you ever felt like your answer was too long, that you're taking too long, that you can't really seem to concise your answer? I see a lot of you, right? Here's the problem. If you don't use a method like the STAR method, your answers will always be that long. So if I ask you a question, like, tell me about a time when you disagree with your manager, I want you to, 1, explain what the situation was. Why do you disagree with the manager? Explain to me what your task was. Like, what were you supposed to do? Tell me what you actually did, which is the action. And lastly, tell me the result. And I actually want you guys to spend a little bit more time on the result, right? Spend more time telling me what was the result of that, and spend more time telling me, like, what do you learn from it, right? What was the lesson? So that's a new letter that you can actually add to this whole method, which is the lesson. A lot of the times when we get asked this type of questions, they're mostly interested in knowing, how do you solve that and what do you learn? But you know what happens? People spend more time talking about what happened instead of what they did. Isn't that crazy? I mean, you guys think about it, right? They want to know, of course, like what happened, yes, but they want to know, how do you actually solve that? And what do you learn from that so you don't do it again? But then people spend way too much time explaining what happened and then just 1 second telling this is the result, right? No, we need to do it the other way around. Let's spend a little bit less time on what happened, more time on what you did, more time on the result, more time on what the lesson was. That is the STAR method, right? So an example of this, right? Let's say someone asked me, tell me about a time when you disagree with your manager, right? So the way I would do this about the whole situation, task, action, result is, there was a time where we wanted to complete a project at a specific timeline, but there was a recommendation to use X software. My action, or my task, or what I was supposed to do was to do XYZ. I actually spoke with my manager about the benefits of utilizing this software and how it would decrease the amount of time utilization to get this project done on a timely manner for the client. As I spoke with my manager, and I actually utilized the software to show them that this actually worked. We were able to complete the project on a timely manner. My manager was actually very confident on me, on my leadership skills, and also on the fact that I was able to innovate in the way that the processes have been done in the company in the past. As a result of that, now, or I was given even more challenging problems as time moved on. And I was able to learn that sometimes we need to innovate and not do what the status quo says. That will be my answer to that question. And that is the STAR method, right? And of course, I could add more details to it, but this is just to give you an example of how I would use this method to answer one of those questions. So very common are virtual interviews. So some tips and tricks for you guys to really ace those interviews are the following. Make sure you have a clear and clean background, right? Like nothing in the back that would distract, whoever you're interviewing with. Dress professionally, which I'm going to show you in the upcoming slides in terms of what to wear to the interview. Make sure your mic, your camera, and Wi-Fi are working at least an hour before the interview. Like, don't wait until the interview time to check your mic or your, everything else. Have 3 to 4 questions for the person interviewing you. I think I saw in the chat, someone said that they have struggled with the questions that they could ask the interviewer. And so I am going to give you the best trick for that. Here's the thing. If you're interviewing with the recruiter, meaning this is probably your first round, your first call, here's a question you can ask them. You can ask them, what do you enjoy the most about working here? Question 1, what do you enjoy the most about working here? 2, you can ask them, what's the culture like in this company? Again, this is for recruiters. What's the culture like for this company? I mean, think about it. Why would you ask a recruiter, like, what do they do on their role? Or like, what was the most challenging thing on their role? The fact is that they're working with you on this, so you know what they do. It's very different than when you're interviewing with a hiring manager or with the manager of the team, right? So those are the type of questions you can ask a recruiter. Now let's change that to the team itself. So let's say you're interviewing with an associate, a manager, the hiring manager, whoever. Questions you can ask them at the end of the interview, depending, of course, on their role. Again, let me give you an example. Let's say you're interviewing for a financial analyst role or a finance role, right? You can ask them about a specific news that have happened in the company recently. And like, let's say X company recently acquired, like it was a big news that this company acquired this other company. I would love to know your thoughts on this, and what do you think how do you think this would, evolve and develop in the future? Question 1. Question 2, ask them difficult questions like the following. If you had the opportunity to go back in time from when you joined this company, what are some things you would have done differently in your first 30, 60, and 90 days? Boom. You know what they're going to do? they're going to say, whoa, I need to go back in time. Now I need to think about what I did 5 years ago that I would have done differently. That's the second question. Third question, you can ask them another difficult question. You can say, what are the top qualities or skills that you've seen in someone that joins your team or someone that is on your team currently? This is the same thing as asking them, what are you looking for on the candidate? But you're indirectly telling them that by wording it differently. So you're basically asking them, what are they looking for? So you know exactly what they're looking for. See, so those are the type of questions that you guys can ask either recruiters or hiring managers. Of course, depends on the role. The questions can be different, but these are just examples of how you can ask and questions that you can ask as well. So last but not least, on virtual interviews, make sure you send thank you emails to the person interviewing you after the interview. It doesn't have to be a whole essay. All right, we're not sending 5 paragraphs, but something short, sweet, concise, just thanking them for their time. It's just a genuine thing to do, right? It's not necessarily a deal breaker. That doesn't mean that if you don't send a thank you email, you're not going to get an offer. I mean, that shouldn't be the case. But sending a thank you email is just a genuine thing to do. Another thing you can do, if you think you didn't answer a question properly, and I did this one time, I remember when I was interviewing at Tesla, my first round interview was with an associate with the energy production for a financial analyst role at Tesla. And I remember one question I didn't answer properly. But I did have a whole project that I worked on Tesla, analyzing their growth through the past few years and, their different like business models and so on. And I sent that project to the interviewer after I was done. And, I clarified my answer to the question that I think I did bad. And I also attached that project to him so he could see how interested I was in the company. Again, think outside the box always, if you're really interested in that company. And if you guys are interested to know, yes, I did get the offer from Tesla that time when it happened. So I mean, every situation is different, but it did work out at the end of the day. So yeah, another very common interview type that a lot of companies are doing nowadays are recorded interviews. So they're mostly called hire views. And basically what the company is going to ask you is that they're going to have 3 pre-populated questions or 2, whatever the amount they decide. And you're just going to have to sit in front of a computer and just record your answer. They can get very awkward. I remember I was really bad at them at the beginning, and I really didn't like them because I like to see people when I'm, interviewing, but sometimes you got to do it. So the way to do this is that most of these hire views have a practice round that you can just practice. So try to do those practice rounds before going into the actual, interview that you're going to send. Make sure you speak clear and concise with things that are relevant to the question, right? And dress professionally. You check your technical things to make sure everything is good, and be on a quiet space, right? Make sure there's no background noise or anything like that. So another type, probably the most common type of interviews, which is not happening as much now, but it does happen, are the in-person interviews. I had a lot of them when we were back in before the pandemic, a lot of them. And just like this person is sitting in front of this woman, I was like that when I was going to conferences. And I remember running around from one booth to another to go into like different interviews. And I had to switch my mindset just like this. Like, I'm going to this company and I know I do this company. And now 5 minutes later, I'm going to the other company. And so you really have to be ready, because opportunities like this don't come often. You got to grab the opportunity and you got to take them and ace that interview. So we're going to go back to this professionally. Really important. Arrive early. Do not arrive early. Doesn't mean like 5 minutes before. I would be ready 10-15 minutes before the interview, honestly, to make sure all your technical stuff are like proper setup. Be polite to everyone you encounter. So if you're going into the office, for example, say good morning, good afternoon to everyone you meet, because you never know. Just be genuine, right? It's just about being genuine. This is probably like something that's like really small, but like, don't chew gum or have like anything in your mouth when you're speaking. your perfume or cologne, just like things with etiquette, like it's not too strong because you never know if that person has an allergy. I mean, all of these things can really mess up your interview. So you just want to make sure you just avoid them completely. Have copies of your resume. Like what I recommend that I did when I was at those conferences, I used to have a portfolio with like a bunch of copies of my resume. I would have cover letters, I would have like business cards and things like that. And I would go to my interviews with that portfolio just in case like, the interviewer wanted to interview me and they didn't have a copy of my resume. I will be ready. So you show them that you're ready. Make sure you keep everything natural. This is a conversation. The interview is a two-way street, right? This is not just about you wanting to get in that company, it's also about them wanting you, right? So make sure you keep the conversation natural. This is not going to be like a robotic answer, right? Just be natural when we're speaking. Have a lot of energy and confidence and enthusiasm and smile, right? Because that's the same vibe that you're gonna like share with the interviewer, and you want to make sure like that is what you actually have. Make sure to ask the questions. Bring a notebook if you have if you want to take notes, which is it's not a bad thing to do. And again, you can send thank you emails at the end of the interview. So what are some don'ts and do's that I recommend for interviewing? Some don'ts, like do not show up late, do not arrive late. I mean, things happen, I know emergencies happen. Try to communicate via email, let them know what happened, and if possible, maybe try to reschedule. I would prefer rescheduling the interview than having to do a 20-minute interview when it was supposed to be 30 minutes and they don't have enough time to really measure how good I am, right? Make sure you don't use too many fillers like and or right. We tend to say those things a lot and we want to make sure we're not saying those things. If possible, if you guys can mute yourselves so there's no background noise, that'll be awesome. But continuing here, do not make up an answer to a question or lie. Trust me, we would know. Trust me, they would know that you're lying. I mean, it's not advisable. Do not lie. Do not make up an answer. Do not do that, right? Do not dress down. I mean, show you respect the interview, so don't dress down. Avoid panicking, avoid anxiety. I mean, it's almost unavoidable to have anxiety, but know how to manage that. Do not speak too fast. You speak at your regular normal range. Do not talk badly about a former job. This is crucial, right? A lot of the times on interviews, you'll get questions asked like, why are you leaving your current role? Like, why are you going from this industry into another industry? And what people tend to do is that they speak bad about the former job or the former company or the former industry. Do not do that, right? Just tell them, I am passionate about this current role, this current industry, and I'm looking for more challenging opportunities. That is it. Do not talk bad about former employers, or companies. And don't talk about politics. I mean, it's something that I'd say don't talk about politics. Just avoid that. When it comes to pay, I've actually meant to have that here. Do ask for pay, but ask the recruiter. So don't go and ask the manager about the pay, because more often than not, they probably don't know. If you ask an associate, right? Let's say an associate, they probably don't know what the pay is for this role, right? So don't ask them about the pay. Ask the recruiter who is, handling your case the entire time. They would know what the pay is. So do's, what things can you do on interviewing? Make sure you're respectful. Make sure you make eye contact, and you listen. Make sure you actively listen so you know that you're actually answering the question. Smile, stay relaxed, really, really important. Have a specific examples to back up your answers. I mean, it's not about just answering the question. It's also about having a specific example so you can say about the question. Make sure you speak confidently as I'm speaking right now, and ask your interviewer about this. So, I mean, People love to talk about themselves. So ask them about them and the things they do. And that would help you like get a little bit, like get rid of those nerves that we get when we're like talking to someone. It helps a lot. It just makes the interview like a little bit more conversational and easier to have. So what are some commonly asked questions that, you get asked in interviews? You guys can take a picture of this, and it's also recorded, but tell me about yourself. Why should we hire you? What are some of your strengths and weaknesses? Tell me about a current event going on. If you're a business major or someone who's like into business, what are you interested in the company? What do you hope to gain in this position? What do you see yourself in 5 years? I mean, all these questions, I promise you, I've come across all of them on interviews. So you need to practice to the point where the answers to these questions come naturally. So my tip to you is put these questions on a Google Doc and then write down some examples for each question. That's what I've been doing for the past couple of years. I have Google Docs of most of the companies I've interviewed with questions and answers, right? And so I usually just go back to them when I have another interview and things like that to refresh my mind on what are some of the answers that I have written down. It'll help you, I promise. So these are some like common questions that you'll probably come across. So someone asked earlier what to ask on interviews, what questions to ask. I gave you guys some questions earlier. Here are some other questions like, what advice will you give in being the most successful at this position? What does a typical day look like for you, right? What are some of the opportunities for mentorship or professional development at the company? Why do you choose to work for this company? And there's an example here. Let's say you're interviewing for Apple. You can say something like, I've read about your company experimenting with artificial intelligence. Can you tell me more about that? And what do you hope to accomplish in the next few years with AI? Again, this is very specific. If that's the role you're going into, this is a great question. So you can change that around if it's, to the role and what you actually will be doing. These are some questions that you can ask the interviewers. By the way, if you guys have questions, you guys can put it on the chat, because we're gonna have a little bit of time later to go over some questions that you guys might have. Very important. Someone asked earlier about technical questions. If your role is very technical, more often than not, you'll get a lot of these technical questions. What you need to do to prep for those questions is practice. So if you're going into software engineering, you need to code, do leak code, try to code as much as possible so you can solve data and algorithm and those type of questions, right? And system designs, for example. If you go into data analyst, you're gonna get technical questions in terms of like data, like SQL, Tableau, Power BI, like how do you analyze data, how do you clean data, and all those things, right? If you're going into financial analyst role or finance or accounting, you're gonna get questions like, what are 3 main financial statements? How do you connect them and things like that? And I promise you, most of the answers to these questions are online. So all you need, all you need to do is really like understand, and then you need to speak about those technical questions like you're explaining that to a 5-year-old. Like you need to own the topic, you need to own it to the point where like you're explaining it like you know it, like you're the professor teaching it. That's how you should explain it. So my advice when it comes to interviewing attire, as you can see on the screen, these are some things for men and women. What are some things you can wear and not wear? It should be very straightforward, but just in case you guys ever wonder what to wear when you go into the interview, this is like a great way to do this. You can take a picture of this and go over it on your own, but like make sure you dress for success. You're dressing like you really want that job. I always tell people that. And then these are other tips that you can use for your interviews as well. In terms of like what women could wear versus men and so on and so forth. You can just like see it on the screen. You can take a picture of it as well and go over it on your own and see like what are some things that you could wear for your interviews. So With that being said, the one thing I didn't speak about, and I think it's the most important one, it's confidence. I need you guys to walk into the interview like you own it. I need you to walk into the interview like you feel like you're the next employee already. I want you to have the 30, 60, 90-day mentality. Question for you guys. How many of you ever heard of the 30, 60, 90-day mentality? Let me know in the chat. I'm actually going to look at the chat right now. So how many of you ever heard about the 30, 60, 90-day mentality? A lot of you say never. A lot of you are saying no. Okay, no problem. Here's what the 30, 60 days mentality is. You are going to impress the interviewers if you talk to them about what you would do if you get the role in the first 30, 60, and 90 days. Because you're showing them already that you're thinking like you're an employee of the company, right? So in my case, let's say I want to go for a financial analyst role and I read the job description and I see what they want from the candidate, I would say, if I were to join this company in this role, on my first 30 to 60 days, I would make sure to understand what are some of the main goals in the projects that I'm assigned to. But I would also try to understand what are things that can be improved and try to give as much feedback as possible to my managers so the communication can be clear. And then you can say like, what are some things you would do to make that happen? And that is a 30, 60, and 90-day plan. And that is how you stand out. And that is how you impress them. And that is how you get their attention. So look it up online, find more information about it. And I know it's going to be really helpful for you. And last but not least, the best way to get confidence is with practice. The best way to practice is with research. It's literally a formula. Research a company, understand the role, practice questions, hence confidence. It literally goes like that. I promise you, if you keep doing this, if you keep practicing, when you get asked these questions, that confidence is going to be there. You know why? Because you know exactly what you're saying. You know exactly what you're talking about. The interviewer don't know, right? And so I want all of you to go into your next interview with that confidence, because all of you all will work at that company. Remember that company that I asked you guys to mention, right? You guys will work at that company. I'm actually going to go up on the chat and I'm going to do that really quick. So you know what? I'm going to go from here. So Jinquan said he wants to work at Google. You'll work there. Steven said Apple. Guess what? You'll work there. Someone said Morgan Stanley. Guess what? You're going to work there. Someone else says Google. Guess what? You're going to work there. So what I want you to do is make sure you have everything in place, your resume, interview, networking, and you'll work at those companies, because why not? You have what it takes. I didn't believe that I had what it takes to work at Google. And guess what? I got the offer and I interviewed and I interned there before. And I got the offer to come back. And I honestly can tell you, I am just like any of you. I went to a non-targeted school. I went to school that did not have any connections with the company. I had no connections with the company myself. I'm a first gen. So my parents couldn't tell me how to apply for a company. My parents couldn't fix my resume. My parents couldn't tell me how to apply. And guess what? I still did it, because all of those things are just things that represents you, things that define you. They're not a disadvantage, you're good enough. So that is all for today's workshop. I hope you'll learn a lot. I actually have one last question, which I asked you at the beginning. And I want you all to tell me now, what is your energy level now from 1 to 10? Let me know in the chat, put a number. I want to see a lot of 10s, because if y'all put a lot of 10, then that means that I actually did something, okay? So I want to see, what's your energy level? I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And I think we can go into the interview part now. So Eleanor or Saskia, I don't know if you guys want to help me manage this part.
Stephanie, I'm sorry, what's the question? I was distracted here.
Yes, I was saying that now we can go into questions from the students if you want to help me manage that.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. Trying to open up the chat. Right, so learn a lot, thank you. Let's see, let me go up a little bit. Energy level is 10, 9, 10, 10, 7, 10. Great, motivated, 8, 10. Yeah, looks like great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. This was a great, informative. I think somebody had asked, you had so many internships while you were at Baruch and you have so many interviews. What will, sorry, hold on one second. Oops. What will you say has worked for you? Has worked for you in your resume?
Yeah, I'm seeing that. So that was Yolanda who asked the question. So I think what has worked in my resume, well, when I didn't have any internships, I worked at a medical office. I worked as an office assistant / medical assistant. I think someone is unmuted. I don't know if Eleanor, if you can help me mute. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so when I didn't have any internships whatsoever, all I had on my resume was my medical office role as an office assistant, and then a project that I work on school. What helped me? Having projects and having work on things that they wanted to see. So for example, when I worked at the medical office and I was an office assistant, I helped them recreate their inventory systems by adding QuickBooks, which they never really had an inventory system in place. And I speak about that on my interviews and on my resume, even though my role was as an office assistant, because even if whatever you have on your resume, you think doesn't have value, it does have value. You just need to understand what the role is. The next thing also was that I had projects that I work on school. So when I was taking like accounting, they asked me to do a financial analysis of two companies and finance and understand like what was the best investment. And I had that on my resume, and I had actually a PowerPoint, and I spoke about that on my interviews, and I spoke about that on my resume. So I had no fancy internships, no fancy companies on my resume before I had my ever first one. And that's really, really what I did, just focusing on what I did at the only one job, my first job in the US, because I just came to the country when I landed a job a couple of years ago. So that's what I would say. That's what I would say. If you don't have experience, create it. So create a project, a personal project on your own, or something you've done in school that's related to the job you're applying for. And that's how you would like really impress with your resume.
That was great. As I was listening to this, and I mentioned it to students as well, it's not about you do this and what you did, even in a medical office. Think about the accomplishments. Where's there something else? It's not about whether or not it's related to what you're going for, but if you think about it, what's some of the skills that you've gained, and something you probably can agree with me, right? It's the just transferable skills, right? Even the medical office, you probably work with customer or clients that are patients that work in, so that's customer service and so on. So any job that we do, we acquire certain skills that we can take to any other job. Just have to think about it and sit down and say, okay, what have I acquired? What did I work on while I was, yes, it takes some time of work to do, but you're doing it for yourself, guys. If you work on it, it'll be easier for you to showcase your talents also, or your skills when your abilities at the interview.
100%. So I see another question here. A hiring manager asked me once few questions of some skills or tasks I have never done. What would be the best answer to that? Great question, Cynthia. So my answer to that is never lie. So don't say something you did, but you didn't do it. I mean, they would know. Never lie. What I would say is you can tell them. So I have never come across this situation. However, if I would come across this is how I would approach it. And you tell them what you would do if you were asked to do something. Does that make sense? So if, let's say, the question was, I don't know if you want to put an example of the question that they ask you, but let's say they ask you, tell me about a time when you disagree with a coworker and you don't have any experience disagreeing with a coworker. You can say, I have never had an experience disagreeing with a coworker. However, if I would, the way I would approach it is trying to understand the situation, try to sit down with my coworker and understand what it's causing the disagreement, listen to it first. And if we can't solve the problem, then I would speak with a manager or someone that I'm confident about to see if we can help solve the problem. So you're basically telling them what you would do, because they're not expecting you to know everything. They're not expecting you to have had all the experiences in the world, but they at least want to know, like, how would you approach something if you haven't come across that? I think someone has their hand raised. So you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi, how are you, Stephanie? Thank you so much for the very informational session. And so as someone who's transferring to Rope next semester, what clubs or organizations would you recommend that I partake in just to like give my resume a boost since I have no industry specific experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely Alpha. My number one recommendation, it's Alpha. I might be a little biased. No, but I really love Alpha. You should definitely consider joining NABA as well. There are other clubs at Baruch, like the American Marketing Association, the Wall Street clubs, if you're interested in finance. Actually, what are you interested in, if you don't mind me asking? Like what career, what roles, what are you interested in?
Yeah, finance.
Finance. Okay.
I've,
So yeah, go ahead.
I've actually heard about the Wall Street Club from one of my friends who's actually in the Wall Street Club as well. He's one of the people on the e-board, and he said, since I have no industry specific experience or any internship experience as of yet, they actually do, like you said, they actually do a lot of projects that you can directly put on your resume and then speak. They're just talking points to have during interviews as well.
100%. So the Wall Street Club, I know this one called the Investment Club too. And in Investment Club, you basically become a junior analyst. So what you do is that you do stock pitches about, like, you know, what a stock pitch is, basically just presenting a company in front of other people. And those people will like give you feedback, and they do that on a weekly basis. So you can put that on your resume too. There's a bunch of other finance clubs and things you can join. But yeah, I think like 3 or 4 clubs that you join will be probably enough for you to really like get some experience in.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you guys couldn't hear me?
Yeah, you like cut off like a little bit because like I guess your signal wasn't working. So like I just like want to make sure like he was able to understand and like hear your question, because at least on my end.
Oh,
like,
but people are saying that they can hear me. Maybe it was yours, Saskia. I'm not sure. But
okay.
yeah. If there is something, okay, if there's something that you guys didn't hear, let me know and I can repeat it eventually. So let me see if there's any other questions. How would you reach out to a person on LinkedIn, or if you did reach out to a recruiter and if they don't email back, should you send a follow-up email? Great question. How would you reach out to a person on LinkedIn? Let me answer that one first. Spend some time on the person's profile first, see what they do. If it's a recruiter, understand what they recruit for. If it's a professional, try to read about the role that they do, and then talk a little bit about how you would like to learn about that specific portion of what they do, and then continue the conversation from there. If it's a recruiter, it's fine if you want to send them the job ID to understand a little bit about a role that they might know about. But if it's a professional, do not ask for a favor right away. Try to just like have a regular conversation with them. I think that's more genuine. And if you did reach out to a recruiter and if they don't email back, should you send a follow-up email? Yes, you should. When that be, it depends. So if you send an email and a week or 2 has passed, I would send a follow-up email. I think the more I would do is just like 3 follow-ups. If you don't hear from that person, then move on. There's a bunch of people out there. Do not get stuck into like 1 or 2 people, right? Some people are busy and that's understandable. So if they don't reply, just move on. The imposter syndrome can really detour people from applying to opportunities. How can you overcome that? So you know what? I had a really good conversation with a leader at my company. I think she's the head of finance for my company. And I asked her that question, like, how do you overcome imposter syndrome? And I remember her telling me, I don't think you ever overcome imposter syndrome. I just think you get to a point where you know how to deal with it, right? So the way to deal with imposter syndrome, it's reminding yourself every day that you're good enough, reminding yourself why you are where you are in the first place, going to your power sources. So who are your power sources? It could be your mom, it could be your best friend, it could be your partner, it could be, you reading a book, whatever your power source is, you basically go back to that so you can regain that energy, and then that imposter syndrome will like just not disappear, but it would just eradicate from your mind at the moment. So that's what I would say. That's the way I personally deal with imposter syndrome, because sometimes you enter into a role that's so important and you feel like everyone's more smart than you, everyone's more intelligent, and you're just there out of luck. And it's not true. I mean, just remember how hard you worked to be there in the first place. That's how you beat imposter syndrome.